Hi class, good day. Last week we discussed about the appropriate techniques in selecting and organizing information as applied to the patterns of development. This week we will talk about how to evaluate text by analyzing claims. These two topics are closely related, so you just gotta have to bear with me. The very purpose of this lecture video is for us not to exceed the 2-hour lecture allotted for each subject. So I hope that if you cannot finish it within our allotted time, you may view this video at the comfort of your home at any time you want. Okay, before we talk about this, I suppose that you have already read the situation I have provided for in the heads up part of the lesson. If you haven't read that one, please pause this video and go back to heads up portion of Schoology and read the situation. The situation in that part is definitely something familiar to you. While you may not receive messages exactly in that manner, you may have been the recipient of a textcam message. Before believing the news and giving personal information, you might have asked questions like, did I even enter such a contest? Or if someone texted you that you won a raffle organized by Felipe Gozon of GMA, you may even ask yourself, did you even join such a contest? Or if the person is asking you for information, why is that person asking you for such a confidential information through text message? In other words, class, you would look for proof, okay, before believing the texter's claim, especially if the texter, of course, these texters are anonymous. This is an example of critical reading. Every day, every moment, we are, I call that, we are constantly encountering critical thinking. Many instances every day require critical thinking. For example, when you see advertisements on television, so shall we say safeguard, alcohol that promise to kill 99.9% of germs, or in case of toothpaste, that 99.9% of cavities or facial washes, pimples will be removed by a certain product. News from the radio or from Facebook accusing a certain politician of corruption. An article in the internet headlines that a certain celebrity has died. I have encountered this multiple times, even though the celebrity is very much alive. You are bombarded. We are all bombarded with a ton of information from all sorts of media that at times it becomes tempting, no? Just to accept everything that comes our way. But this is dangerous to believe. Everything you are told without questioning the aspect is so dangerous. This is precisely why critical thinking, especially as applied to reading, is a necessary skill for us or for you to develop. The previous lesson, as what I've mentioned earlier, introduced you to the different patterns of development and the appropriate techniques that you may use in selecting and organizing information. Though you have exercised your detail-oriented reading skills, effective reading also entails a deeper, more analytical sort of engagement. Whenever you read something and you begin to ask questions about what the author has written, you're starting to think critically about the text. You are digging deeper into the text by thinking about its meaning and significance. This will be the focus of this lesson. Before we go on or continue to our discussion, I want to browse through motivation because I have provided there an activity. The activity is entitled How I See It. Okay, I am asking you to enumerate what do you think are the characteristics of a critical reader. Then after that one, I have provided some questions for you to answer. One of which is, what did you consider in coming up with the list? And with those three that you have listed, do you possess all of such? Or which characteristic of the three that you have listed do you think you strongly possess? And which one do you think you need to improve on? Okay, so do not forget to answer that activity. Moving on to our discussion on critical reading. Maybe you're asking yourself, what is critical reading? Class, whenever you read something and you evaluate claims, later on you will know what these claims are. And when you seek definitions, or when you judge information, this is fake news, this is true. Or when you hear someone say something or read something that um, requires proof and then you demand proof. And sometimes when you question assumptions, you are thinking critically. This type of reading goes beyond passively understanding a text. If you can remember, I have emphasized in our introductory lesson that reading is an active process. Okay, so in critical reading, it goes beyond passively understanding the text. Why? Because you process the author's words. And out of those words, you make judgment after carefully considering the reading's message. But why should you read critically? Reading critically means you are thinking critically. Okay? This shows that you do not simply accept the message of that text. You bring to your reading your own experience and perspective, and use these to separate yourself from the text and judge for yourself what you consider important, second, logical, and most of the times, what is right. This interaction between the text and the reader is necessary because reading results from a negotiation of meaning between whom? Between the text and the reader. By reading critically, you find out what the author's views on something. You ask questions. You evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the author's argument and decide to agree or disagree with that. Critical reading allows you to enter into a dialogue with the author, and this deepens your understanding of the issue or topic discussed. Therefore, class, to arrive at a sufficient interpretation of the text, you need to become a critical and active reader. Let me reiterate this again. Why should you read critically? Because reading means you are thinking critically. Take note of this, okay? Reading critically means you are thinking critically. Let me repeat that. Reading critically means you are thinking critically. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the lesson. How would we apply critical reading strategies? And what are these critical reading strategies, by the way? Before talking about these strategies, I wanted to look at or to read the text, the policies and achievements of the government and the regeneration of the Filipino by Manuel L. Quezon. I have provided below the link to that text. Just to give you a context as to what this text is all about, um, the title says so, but this text is delivered to the students and teachers by then President Manuel L. Quezon on August 1938. Okay, and that is followed by what? An activity, which is a vocabulary check. You gotta have to peruse that one below. I have provided here in the activity. Now let us discuss the critical reading strategies. First strategy, keeping a reading journal. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever kept a diary? Or if you did, you must have felt free while expressing whatever was on your mind. This is because there are no rules in keeping a diary. You write for yourself. For girls, that is very common, right? A reading journal is similar to keeping a diary, except that you are writing your feelings and ideas in reaction to your reading assignment. This process allows you to develop your impressions of the text and connect them to your personal experiences. Now, what is the effect of this? This allows you now to better relate to the essay, to the text, and understand the author's ideas. Take note, class, when you keep a reading journal, it is best to have a separate notebook for this purpose, okay? Or you can just have, for those who are bloggers here, you can just write in your blog, private blog. Those who have, I think, what is this blog site? It is Tumblr, yeah, Tumblr. You can also write your journal there, e-journal, I call it. And you also have to include the titles of the reading assignments you're responding to and dates of your entries. For example, the policies and achievement and the regeneration of people by Manuel L. Quezon, you have to indicate the title of that text in your reading journal. Make it a habit to reread your entries so that you can see how your ideas and writing have evolved. Keep in mind that I and your classmates may read your work, so only write about what you feel comfortable sharing. So if I say that you have to comment your reading journal in the comment section of our discussion, then be prepared to do so. And you also have, I think, to try it out on previous reading. Let us say that you found the following quote interesting, like, "We have attained our freedom, but our spirit is still bound by the shackles forged from the frailties of our nature. We owe it to ourselves and to our posterity to strike them down." Okay, yun yung sinabi ni Manuel L. Quezon. What are the occasions where you felt like you were not maximizing the freedom given to you because of some challenges? No, sa balay, no, in school, in our current setup. And why do you feel this way? Well, what can you do to overcome your weaknesses? Okay, so these are some of the questions. In the normal course of things, I am always asking my students to share it to the class, but later on during our synchronous class, I might ask you to do so. Okay, next, annotating the text. Annotating the text, class, simply means making notes on your copy of the reading. Okay, in your book, the book of Pena and Anodin, there is this huge space, the sidebar of that book. You can write in there, you can annotate. While I am discussing the concepts about critical reading, etc., you can write in that sidebar your understanding or the key points that I am espousing during my discussion. Annotation also includes highlighting, or you can just underline the important passages and writing notes, comments, questions, even the reactions, or I encourage you to write there yung mga smiley star, or I call it put a star. If you have fully understood um, the concept, you put a star, you draw a star beside that text. By doing this, you are entering into a dialogue, okay, with the author and not just passively reading the text. It is usually best for us or best for you to annotate text after you have read it more than once to ensure that you understand it properly. Since you're still developing your fluency in reading, I encourage you to reread the text, okay? But if you're already fluent in reading, then isang basa, okay na, okay? In the text that I have provided you, the one written by Manuel L. Quezon, or the speech delivered by Manuel L. Quezon, it says there that the Filipino today is soft and easygoing. Then I will ask you, do you agree with that statement? If so, why? And if not, then why? You write that in your um, journal. The next critical reading strategy here is outlining the text. Creating a rough outline of the text will also be helpful in getting to understand it more critically. Okay? By locating the thesis statement, I hope you're already familiar with thesis statement. Ms. Ginny will be discussing thesis statement comes the time that you will be writing your position paper or whatsoever. And also the claims, which we will be discussing later on, and evidence included, and then plotting these into an outline, you can see how the writer structures, sequences, and connects his or her ideas. If you can recall, in our previous discussion, we have the two types of outline. We have the point by point and subject by subject outline. So whenever you read a text, after which you can create an outline in order for you to see how the author structures his ideas. Okay, try and in this case I wanted to try outlining President Quezon's speech. Okay, your outline can simply consist of one sentence summary of each paragraph, of course, and you can group paragraphs which talk about the same topic together. Moving on to the second to the last critical reading strategy, which is summarizing the text. I know that we are all familiar with summarizing a text. Okay, it is similar to outlining. It's just that you just need to get the gist of the text in summarizing. A summary, as you or most of you know, consists of getting the main points of the text and important supporting details. Remember, there may be a lot of supporting details in a text, but what is required for you to have in a summary are those most important ones, those which are of significance. Summarizing class is very useful. Okay, I do practice summarizing often, because what is the significance of this, sir? Simple. You can better understand the reading if you can recognize and differentiate major and minor points in the text. And sometimes also, when it comes to your exam, and you will be reaching college, and then you have to summarize a text, a very long text, and then you will have to study the ideas contained in that text prior to your exam. You don't have to read the entire text, but just refer to your summary. Usually, when you look at the thesis statement of a top and the topic sentences, what you think are helpful in creating your summary. I think these are helpful. The supporting details in a paragraph and the succeeding paragraphs may be used to develop or to clarify the writer's point. Okay, try to summarize the speech, yung kay Manuel Quezon, by writing the thesis statement and choosing 2 to 3 supporting details. Lastly, in the critical reading strategies is questioning the text. Okay, in questioning the text, maybe you have this misconception that when you question a text, you are actually invalidating the credibility of the author, the credibility of his ideas. But that is not the case here. Okay, when you question the text, it involves asking specific questions on points which are skeptical, which you find skeptical. These may be the topics that do not meet your expectations or agree with your personal views. Sometimes when you read mga column articles, mga opinion articles, this is where you can exercise this critical reading strategy. You may question, you may ask question to the author or to the text itself, those things which are which you find ano, skeptical ka about. Okay, you may also take note of things that you found impressive. Of course, you do not only focus on those things which you are skeptical about. You can also um, focus on those things which are impressive. And I'm just going to enumerate some questions to you in order for you to be good in questioning the text. First question that you shall ask: what type of audience is addressed? Okay, in our introductory lesson on about reading or writing, we talk about the audience, right? And what are the writer's assumptions? Thirdly, what is the intention of the author in writing the text? And how well does the writer accomplish these? How convincing is the evidence presented, especially when the text is very controversial, or not controversial, but it deals with a controversial issue? You really have to look for the evidence presented. Okay. Apart from that, you may also ask, how reliable are the sources? Remember, sources matter in writing. Are they based on personal experience, or are there scientific data being included, or does it quote, for example, mga highly qualified publicist? Yan. Did the writer address opposing views of the issue? No, dito na tayo magkakatalo. Because if the author does not address the opposing views, there may be a bias in that text, which is a very um, discouraged practice in writing. Okay, is the writer persuasive in his perspective? Remember, most writers write to persuade the readers. And then you have also to evaluate after reading the entire text if the author is able to achieve this. Okay, if you're swayed, then the author may be persuasive. Let's move on to the next: identifying and analyzing claims. I have mentioned about claims earlier, but maybe you don't have a clue what claims are. But hindi naman to sila difficult. Let us first distinguish, okay, incidental to the to learning claims, the different types of claims, is the identification of explicit information and implicit information. What is explicit information? Class, critical reading also means that you are to distinguish the information that is clearly stated, that is explicit information in the text, from the ideas that are suggested, and that we call that the implicit information. This will help you to make your inferences about what you read. Sir, how can we tell whether something is implicit or explicit? Simple. As you have observed, explicit information is clearly written and explained in the text so that the reader will not be confused. And explicit information is already found in the text black and white. You can find the words letter black and white in the text. Meanwhile, when we discuss about implicit information, it refers to something that is implied, okay, implicit, okay, but not stated outright in the text. Because the idea is not written in the text, you need to use the clues in the text to make an inference of what you have read. In inference, when we speak of inference, class, it is a conclusion that you make based on explicit information and your reasoning and background knowledge. So your schema experiences do matter in coming up with an inference. For example, based on the given text description of Filipinos today, yung kang Manuel L. Quezon, some things have not changed according to him, especially if you consider things that you see on the news. Now, let us proceed to the main point of this part. What are claims pala, sir? Okay, before we discuss about what claims are, knowing how to identify explicit and implicit information will help you in one of the most important skills needed in critical reading. First, evaluating the claims made by an author, and succeeding ones I will give it to you later. This involves going back to the text to recognize the writer's arguments and evidence, including evidence, huh? so you can begin judging the writer's work. Remember, in critical reading, we are constantly judging, evaluating the writer's work. Whenever you read something, class, you find yourself sometimes looking for a writer's point or position regarding the chosen topic. If you do so, that point is also known as a claim. Okay? Claim is the central argument or the thesis statement of the text. Remember that one. A claim is the central argument or thesis statement of the text. This claim is what the writer tries to prove. Okay? Itong mga claims na ito, since it is the central argument of the text, it is what the writer is trying to prove. If the writer say that Glenn Robredo will be the best president the Philippines will have, that is the central argument, and the writer will not prove that claim. Okay, how the writer will prove that claim? He may provide details, explanations, and other types of evidence. Maybe in the example I have given you, mga records ni Robredo as a vice president, qualities of her that are what do you call that? Necessary to run a country. Yan, ganyan. As such, it is usually found in the introduction of or the first paragraph of the text. But this is not the brick and mortar rule, huh? The iron rule that it is always found in the first paragraph, but it can be found in the second paragraph. It depends on the author, but most of the time, most of the writers, it is found in the first sentence of the first paragraph. The claim is the most important part of the text, class. You have to remember that. Okay, the quality and complexity of reading depend on claim. Why, sir? Because claim defines the paper's direction and scope. Okay, it determines where will this text go. The claim, class, is a sentence, just to reiterate, that summarizes the most important thing the writer wants to say as a result of what? Of his thinking, reading, or writing. Sir, what are the characteristics of a good claim? I have enumerated four here. Let's start with the first one, that a claim should be argumentative and debatable. You know, class, when a writer makes a claim, he is making a case. What case, sir? Robbery? No, it's not, and that's not the one. A case for a particular perspective, okay, on the topic. Readers expect to be able to raise objections to your claim if you're the writer. Okay? Dapat ang readers mo object sa mong claim because, you know, not all will believe in you. And they can only raise objections if the claim is something that can be reasonably challenged. Most of the claims, class, are debatable. That's why you can raise objection. If it is not debatable, then there will be no objection at all. If you say that the sun is the hottest uh, star in our planet, then in our solar system, uh, claim pa ba yan? Di ba? This is already a fact. It may also lead to overgeneralization and vague assertion. Okay, next characteristic is that the claim must be specific and focused. There's nothing much to elaborate on this part because the claim, if the claim is unfocused, class, the paper will be too broad in scope, okay, and will lack direction or even a clear connection to support what you have provided there. So when you write, make sure that the claim is specific and focused. Then third one, it must be interesting and engaging. How, sir? It should hook the reader. Okay, who may these reader kasi class, they may not agree with you, and in order for you to encourage them to consider your perspective, make your claim interesting and more so engaging. Okay, next, A claim should be logical. This is very basic. Your claim must be logical, um, because it shall result from a reasonable weighing of support provided. Okay, I will provide you some questions um, that will help you determine the writer's claim while you are reading the text. First, what is the author's main point? Kanay mong ipunta na una. Second, what is the author's position regarding it? If the text talks about the South China Sea, now what is the author's position regarding it? Is he in favor of the Tertes way of handling the South China Sea dispute? You gotta have to focus on that because it is where you can find the position of the author. Sana tayo. Okay, let's distinguish the types of claims. Earlier, you already know the characteristics of a good claim. At this point, you will be introduced to different types of claims that a writer can make. These are the following: claims of fact, claims of value, and lastly, claims of policy. You can usually determine this class by examining the type of questions they answer about the text. So later on, when I discuss these three, you gotta have to take note of those questions that each claim usually answer. Let's start with the first claim, the claims of fact. When we speak of claims of fact, these are quantifiable assertions or a measurable topic. Claims of fact class assert that something has existed, exist, or will exist based on data. Okay? Fact, data. Take a look at these two. They rely on what? Reliable sources, systematic procedures, uh, so that it could be validated. This is what makes them different from other inferences. Claims of fact usually answers a what question. What? Okay. When determining whether something is a claim of fact, you may ask yourself, okay, the following questions. First one, is this issue related to a possible cause or effect? Related ba siya sa cause, sa effect? Is the statement true or false? How can you or how can its truthfulness be verified? Okay, eh, is the claim controversial or debatable? So if your answer to those questions are all affirmative, then it may be a claim of fact. Okay, example here, climate change is exacerbated by people. Can it be verified? Yes. Are there data that will support this? Yes. And therefore, this is a claim of fact. Let's proceed to the next, claims of value. When you speak of claims of value, it, it talks about asserting something that is qualified or that can be qualified, okay? They consist of arguments about moral, philosophical, and aesthetic topics. You gotta have to remember the three. This consists of arguments about moral, first, second, philosophical, or aesthetic topics. These types of topics try to prove that some values are more or less desirable compared to others. They make judgments based on certain standards on whether something is right or wrong. Kanagin na siya ang claims of value. Look at the word value. Good or bad, something similar. Claims of value, you gotta have to take note of this. Attempt to explain how problems, situations, or issues ought to be valued. What do you mean by that? To discover these explanations, let me just enumerate the following questions that you can ask to test whether a statement is a claim of value or not. First one, which claims endorse what is good or right? So we're dealing now with good or right. If there is a statement there that uh, makes you evaluate that it is something good or right, then it may be a claim of value. Okay, and if the text also talks about what qualities should be considered good and why, which next, which of these contend with others, and which ones do you think are more important? Why? Okay? Pag yun ang mga questions ma-ask mo, and the text is answer is the same, then it may be claim of value. And lastly, I would like to add, what are some concrete examples of such values? If the writer provides for concrete examples of these values that constitute good, constitute what is bad, constitute what is moral, constitute what is aesthetic, then it may be a claim of value. Take a look at the example I provided herein. Coke is better than Pepsi. Okay, what makes us say that this is a claim of value? Take a look at the word better. How can we define better? On whose standard uh, is the basis of this statement? This is your preference. You value more one brand over the other. So it is a claim of value. Next, claims of policy. Remember the definition of claims of policy. It posits that specific actions should be chosen as solutions to a particular problem. Solution to a particular problem. So when a text suggests a solution to a problem, then it may be a claim of policy. And then, sir, unsa man tong words? What are those words that I have to look for in order for me to have a clue that such statement is under claims of policy? The words, unsa man tong should, yeah, you can find it here in the example. Ought to, kasi ought to, dito ought to nga kon, ought to, must, shall. Okay, these are words that usually indicate that a statement is a claim of policy. No, class, the claims of policy, they are called claims of policy because they defend actionable plans, okay? And it usually answers how questions. The following questions, which I will be enumerating to you, are useful when you evaluate a statement, whether or not it is a claim of policy. First question, does the claim suggest a specific remedy to solve a problem, a specific way of doing things in order to solve a problem? It may be a claim of policy if your answer is yes. Is the policy clearly defined? Pag sinabi na policy sa MATE is to limit the number of passengers, tricycle passengers to 2, and clearly defined ba yan siya na policy. Next, is the need for the policy established? Is there a necessity for that policy? Yes, because we are in a pandemic. That is claim of policy. Is the policy the best one available? For whom? According to whose standards? If it is the best one available, the text claims so, then whose standard is that? Okay? Then, does the policy solve the problem? That is the very important part. Does the policy solve the problem? If your um, answer is yes, then, or if you're convinced that yes, then it may be a claim of policy. I have given you an example in here. Students should read the assigned text material before the teacher lectures on it. Take a look at the word should, okay? When it suggests a specific course of action, that may be a claim of policy. Let's move on to our next to the next part of the discussion. We will be identifying the context of text development. Scary lang ang title, no? But this is very the easiest part of the discussion. Context of text development. We talk about how to be a critical reader, right? At this point, we will define what is context because everything that we read shall be put in context. Okay, class, let me remind you, or let me emphasize to you, that being a critical reader also involves what? Understanding the text, um, the understanding that the text that we are reading or is developed in a certain context. Okay, a text is neither written nor read in a vacuum. Wag yun na siya mong timanan. Its meaning and interpretation are affected by a given set of circumstances, what's around uh, in the creation of that text. And that is context. Okay? So context, if we are going to define that one, it is the social, cultural, political, historical, and other related circumstances that surround the text and form the terms from which it can be better understood and evaluated. Okay, that's why the knowledge of the text context helps in appreciating the text message more deeply. Pag ang text is a joke, or the text there appears to be not a joke but it was delivered in um, an atmosphere where is everyone or wherein everyone is joking, then it must be construed as a joke. Okay, I have questions that will guide you in considering context. First question: when was the work written? Why do we need to study this? When was the work written? Because the context before may not be applicable now. If the context before, during pa sa mga Spanish colonial period in the Philippines, nagkalesa-kalesa pa, and then the writer says that the kalesa is the best mode of transportation. Is it still applicable now? No, the context is during the Spanish colonial era. And then what were the circumstances that produced it? The text. Anong produced it? The text. What were the circumstances that produced it? Why uh, did Jose Rizal, what made Jose Rizal write El Filibusterismo, No Limitangere? What were the circumstances back then? Okay, if you take a look at the content of these two novels written by Jose Rizal, they depict the plight of Filipinos during the Spanish time. So if you read that novel, you look at the context. Okay, you look at the circumstances that produced uh, or that pushed Jose Rizal in writing those. What issues does it deal with? Okay, what issues ang gideal sa text? And is that issue present, found in the present context, or is that issue based on their experiences during the time the text was written? You have to consider that. Speaking of context, we have two um, subcomponents of it. First, intertext. Okay, I mean these are not subcomponents but techniques. Okay, intertext is actually one of the techniques in analyzing the context of a text development by defining its intertextual link to another. Nyo, sa man ang intertextual, sir? Okay, let us define what is intertextuality. Intertextuality is the modeling of a text meaning by another text. In simple terms, a text will not exist without the prior text. Libog yapon, sir. Let's put it this way. The Game of Thrones series will not exist without the Game of Thrones novel. Okay? The Nim's reply to the shepherd na poem will not exist without the poem The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. Nga na siya. Okay? So, intertext exists because of the existence of a previous text. And nasabtan na. Okay? Further, intertext is defined as the connections between language, images, characters, themes is also part, or subjects depending on their similarities in language, genre, or discourse. Yan yung i-remember nyo lang. Class, intertextuality is also seen, no, sa mga movies, text. So, basta katulay nyo timanan. If a text exists because of a prior text, then it is an example of intertext. Next, hypertext. Hypertext is a nonlinear way of showing information. Masama ng hypertext. Intertext kasi before, mga replies lang ito, no? Uh, in hypertext, it is developed in the 21st century. Why? Because of the emergence of technology and the use of computers. So instead of putting there everything, no? Mura ka na nag-hyperlink. Kaya it's called hypertext. Mura ka nag-hyperlink. You observe Wikipedia that there are several links that when you click those links, it will route you to another page containing another information. That is the very example of hypertext, okay? Just a second. Let us proceed to the next portion of our coverage, critical reading as reasoning. In this topic class, we will first discuss, I'm sorry, that is supposed to be assertion. There is no S before R. We are to discuss the incidental topics within critical reading as reasoning. First one is assertion. Sir, what is assertion? Okay, before defining that, let us take note that becoming a good critical reader means that you are able to logically evaluate the claims of the writer. I have emphasized that one earlier. Okay, any writer who would want the reader to consider and possibly agree on his ideas, the claims that he or she puts forward belongs in this context, assertion. So the writer must have or must espouse assertion in the text. In expository writing or informative writing, it is where you can find assertion most of the time, because the primary channel of for a reader to assert his claim is usually itong expository writing. Assertions class are declarative sentences. Okay, let's define that one. These are declarative sentences that claim something to be true about something else. Or in layman's term, it is a sentence that is either true or false. In simplest terms na yan. Okay, I have few examples I think here. Ayan pala. Let's have the four types of assertion. The first type of assertion is fact. Second, convention. Third, assertion of opinion. And fourth one, assertion of preference. Let's discuss the first type. The first type of assertion is fact, assertion of fact. When you speak of assertion of fact, it is a statement that can be proven objectively by direct experience, testimonies of witnesses, verified observations, or maybe the results of research. Kasi nga fact siya eh. Because statements of fact can be double checked for accuracy, there is a general agreement about the truth that they espouse or posit. I have an example here. Um, the Sampaguita's roots are used for medicinal purposes, such as an anesthetic and a sedative. This statement class is a fact. Why, sir? Because it can be directly verified by experience or reliable research reports. You can just look for this in the internet if it really is used for medicinal purposes. Okay, it can be proven by science, by data, by research. Let's move on to the next assertion of convention. What is convention pala, sir? Okay. When we speak of convention, class, it is a way in which something is done similar to like traditions and norms. Conventions develop on historical precedents. History, tan-awon gini mong history sa convention. What else? The laws, balaod, rules, usage, and customs. Their truthfulness is verified by how commonly held definitions and beliefs are interpreted. Okay? It is not a one man's act. It is a community uh, based assertion. Why? Because you have to prove, no? Yung mga historical precedents, customs. Customs is uh, practiced by a community. Okay? Something to note about assertion of convention is that they may sound factual. Mga siyang confusing about fact, no? Due to their being derived from customs. Okay? But because they are socially accepted ways of doing things, they cannot be verified objectively by measurements. Why do we construe usually convention to be factual, especially when we belong to that community? Because we ourselves practice the custom. That's why libog siya usahay to determine. I have an example here. Okay. The Sampaguita belongs to genus Jasminum of the family Olisiae. Olisiae. Ayan. Sir, anong siya? Convention class. This statement is a convention because, nga naman, it is based on classification system that is made up by scientists, no? And is acceptable only to scientific community. Malay ba na to? Asa na just minum, no? Asa mo mga family, sila rami nagbuhat-buhat ani mga scientists na. So, it is only applicable to them, no? The mga scientists, no? They're the ones who primarily believe about genus, about family, about sa panaytawag na kingdom, sa mga kingdom sa biology. Next, the third type of assertion is opinion. Okay, we all know that opinions are most of the time based on facts, but are difficult to objectively verify kasi nga opinion siya. Because what? Because of what? Uncertainty, okay, of producing satisfactory proofs or soundness. For me, itong opinion, why is it difficult to prove? Because only few evidence will support it, or maybe those who write this particular type of text are merely reliant on very limited evidence, which shall not be the case. Okay, so when we speak of opinion, it is based on facts but are difficult to objectively verify. Why? Because opinions are mostly biased. Okay? Opinions result from ambiguities. Yan. The more ambiguous a statement, the more difficult to verify. If something is difficult to verify, then it is prone to disputes. Remember, an opinion is disputable. Let's take a look at this example. The popularity of Sampaguita flowers is most evident in places of worship. So why is that an opinion? Class, it is an opinion because it is based on an observation that needs to be proven pa, no? By studies and by repeated observation pa. There are many factors involved that make this explicit judgment difficult. So, in order for us to ascertain that Sampaguita is really more or most popular in places of worship, kailangan natin ng research, observation, further observation pa. Next one, we have assertion, yung preference as an assertion. There's nothing much to elaborate here because preferences are based on personal choice mo yan. It is therefore uh, subjective. Okay, subjective. Kasi personal preference mo yan eh. Imong choice yan. And this cannot be objectively or logically attacked. Mag-vote day ka sa akong preference. If I like Coke over Pepsi, that is my preference. That is not yours to dispute. For example, here, Sampaguitas are the most beautiful and most fragrant of all flowers. O magbuot day ka sa kuway, that is how I see sampaguita. Okay? It is a preference because it says a lot about the type of flower of flowers and that the writer likes, no? Instead of objectively comparing the qualities of sampaguita to other flowers, he or she just says here that uh, most beautiful and fragrant on her perspective lang. Okay? Not talking about qualities, but merely her or his judgment of the flower sampaguita. Okay, let's pause for a while. Okay, let's proceed. Um, Before we proceed pala into determining textual evidence, I think it is cogent for us to discuss how to formulate counterclaims. Okay, because incidental to being a critical thinker, you need to also know how to formulate counterclaims because you will eventually write no in the subject. To be an effective critical thinker class, it is enough or it is not enough to just be able to identify claims and assertions as what we have discussed earlier. The ability also to analyze an argument is essential, no, to understanding the text. Just a second, my computer is shutting down. Cancel. Um, it is also essential for you to understand the text more deeply. Okay, but understanding the claim is not the only thing about knowing the argument about an argument. Okay, you must learn how to analyze the counterclaims and evidence provided by the author, no, in the text. Being able to um, recognize and formulate counterclaims in reaction to an argument is a characteristic of a good critical reader. We are aiming to be a good critical reader. That's why you must learn how to formulate counterclaims. You have to take note of this. I failed to include this in my PowerPoint presentation. Sir, what is counterclaims pala? Take note of this definition. Counterclaims are claims made to rebut a previous claim. In short, or in simplest term, it is a rebuttal to the claim made by the author. Okay? It provides a contrasting perspective to the main argument. If you are in disagreement to the claim made by the author, then what shall you do? Formulate a counterclaim. But before that, you must be able to locate and provide counterclaims to an argument. Uh, I'm sorry, but by being able to locate first and then provide counterclaims to an argument, you are showing a deep competence and familiarity with the writer's topic. It shows that you are examining different perspectives and not just passively accepting the writer's claim. So pag wala kay reaction to a text, you're just accepting. You're not a critical thinker. You're not a critical reader, which we are aiming here. Okay, it shows that you have thoroughly when you are able to formulate the counterclaim. It shows that you're thoroughly considered that you have thoroughly considered the topic and are willing to engage to different viewpoints from your own, thus remaining objective. Writing class requires objectivity. Okay, that's why you have to venture into different perspective of the author, perspective of the one against to the ideas of the author, and I think that will be you. And then if that is you, then you gotta have to formulate counterclaims. If the author says that the Philippines is the poorest country on earth, then formulate the counterclaim. Okay? Why? Because it also helps you clarify. what your personal position really is about the topic. On the issue of Nas Daily and Wang Ud, oh, asang gid ka dito? Are you in favor or are you in sympathy with Nas Daily? Hmm? So what is your stand now about the issue? Nas Daily claimed that fake news daw yung sinabi ng mga Filipino, so spoke against him. Okay, now I have questions here that will guide you in formulating counterclaim. First, what are the major points on which you and the author can disagree? Okay, so ano disagreement na? Of course, it is counterclaims. You have to focus on the points that you will be disagreeing because there will be no counter, no claim if you are agreeing. So focus on the points that you will be disagreeing. Okay, what is their strongest argument? And then what did they say to defend their position? What else? What are the merits of their view? Did they provide mga evidences nila? No, not no, there's no word as evidence, it's pieces of evidence. Um, is it practicable? Is it necessary? Is it beneficial? So these are all constitutive of merits. And what are the weaknesses or shortcomings of their argument? Are they are there any hidden assumptions? Sometimes when you're able to look at the weakest argument of the writer, it is where you can um, pound on. Okay, no? Because if that is the weakest argument, then that means you may have a better argument to it, a better alternative to it, which will, of course, elevate your entire argument. Then, which lines from the text best support the counterclaim you have formulated? Is there a weakness in the text? If there is a weakness, then you're able to formulate counterclaim for it. Also look for any statement made by the author that will somehow support your counterclaim. Okay? That is for formulating counterclaims. You will have to practice this. It is easy to just learn this by concept, but in practice, you may have a mga bumpy road ahead. But nevertheless, I believe that you can do formulate counterclaims, especially that it will be the center of your ano, performance check. Now, discussing on the determining textual evidence, I would like to reiterate that better to better evaluate the author's argument, you should be able to determine the evidence from the text. Okay, this will allow you to validate assertions of the author and your own counterclaims as a response to what you are reading. Evidence class is defined as the details given by the author to support his or her claim. That is very basic. Okay, a claim without evidence makes the entire text weak. You have to remember that the evidence provided by the writer substantiates the text. That is what makes what makes the text persuasive per se. It reveals also and builds on the position of the writer and makes the reading more interesting to you as a reader or to anybody who reads the text. Okay, why? Because this evidence class pieces of evidence are very crucial, no, in swaying your reader to your side, because the whole intention of writing for most writers is to persuade the readers. If you're able to establish a good claim and then able to support such a claim with pieces of evidence, very persuasive evidence, then your entire text may be persuasive. Okay? Just like, for example, in court, a jury or sa Philippines, di ba, we are having a judge. He or she relies only on the evidence presented by both parties, no? Presented by the lawyer, then after that, may evidence na. It will now be the lawyers. purpose is to persuade the judge in his delivery in the presentation of evidence. So all of these constitute to uh, or comprise, or all of these are factors actually in the decision, uh, uh, factors for a judge to decide on a particular case. Okay, an evidence class can include the following: facts and statistics, which must be objectively validated information on your subject. Dapat validated siya. You cannot make up your facts, okay? Opinion from experts, not just any expert. Those who are already known to most to be experts in that field, okay? Leading authorities on a topic, for example, if you're talking about um, South China Sea dispute, you can go to Sasro Gandusaso, who is an expert in international relations, also on to Richard Hidarian, who is also an expert on that. Or if you're talking about journalism, you can consult Jessica Soho because she is a Peabody, no, award awardee, no, the one and only Jessica Soho. And then it could also be including personal anecdotes, okay? Those mga anecdotes are kato may experiences mo, very brief lang. Those experiences which are relevant and objectively uh, considered. Now, sir, what are these? How do we determine textual evidence? Let me share to you some questions that will help you determine textual evidence. First one, what questions can you ask about the claims? Okay. Next one, which details in text answer your questions? Then what are the most important details in the paragraph? What is each one's relationship to the claim? Then are the sources reliable? Yan. Marami yan kasi silang questions, but those are few only. Okay, let's take a look at what comprises a good evidence. First, it is unified. Hmm. Second, it is relevant to the central point. There is coherence. The third one is specific and concrete. So specific siya. Accurate. No? And representative or typical. So it speaks for a group. Or ayan, we're down to the last slide na siguro ito. Tulog na ko. Performance check. Your performance check will be writing a 1,000 word critic. So just read the instruction that I have provided in your Schoology. Imagine that you are an editor of your school paper, okay? Your teacher has given you the freedom to choose any opinion article about the ASEAN integration. It can be any of the discipline, such as the science, social studies, economy, di ba meron tayong ASEAN Economic Community by 2025, I think, or 2022. You are tasked to review your chosen article, and it will be featured in the next issue of the school paper. Your critique should consist of 1,000 words. Good review will identify the claim of the text, describe its context, and evaluate the evidence provided. So yung diniscuss ng author na dyan sa article na yan, you look at the claim made by the author, you look at those assertions, you look at those evidence, and then you formulate your counterclaim and then evaluate also their evidence. Are these reliable? Are we leading to that goal? For example, ASEAN Economic Community. So you gotta have to evaluate all of these. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening. You can still view this anytime you want. I will not be taking this down. I hope you have learned something from our discussion. If something is vague to you, you can freely ask me or clarify it to me in Schoology. Just message me in Schoology. Okay. So thank you for listening and work on the task found in sa part na practice, because there's, I think, a bunch of tasks in practice and enrichment. Take note also that in your evaluation part, it will constitute to summative. So that's it. Bye bye, everyone.